talingim oh you tarawra wal balula lembalti kare
malung total moiwai malung total mi asura sama Chinese mal to bet sing total mar gol adal masil tuni ne ko koren setial momong ngokotium elol 96 episode da tial Berius aisa au era do mule do siasus el morai bidul marklai bilung ebiraklai marugul rubugul mar masil belau to bet regalo do siasus el mora president pa vice president marugul mungutiling ra aigal madala aurora am trigidra blur belau mal to bet sus amara rugol adal masil tunin e oren setial program rigidra tutau Ahora do lemol mengaria como setiale calendar gid ngaria imol announcement menguasai agora el center o sigra one el mo communication and outreach officer tia asmer el tial rauror el albuil o game el buil atrim etu ngam sim tagid el position sim tagid el tial rauror lo sigra communication and outreach officer Rogul kora tranquila atora auror malu ben kora tranquila te auror malu ben kora di information legit tel center gid mal sebil mitiger sel PICRC website mangidil adol kora interested el momdinga kora sal momdinga sei tel kora lu center ngarang ngaragel wate al marang mal sel di masjid website ngania rogul beldu kursel El atuta malung larungu de ngaria terum gegre legabil el ngarsel Stanford University tia ngara California. Etergal terul legabil a ngartialo urol agora roof center el mrura qal toqtang tir ya subira togora igal ar. To gora daital musubil asi malwangara igal rasela ar edirgal wangara igal raqtel uleng mugada to ase decision generic ulang mo kata igal sigurase mengsagal mo siyoga era Sina Tillman ngatsi the Stanford University madire ke choy kumangai ngal ka hawan ding ngara school segi del Stanford University nga California tilteru nga angartial sorry when are you returning back
May 24th
oi tanga when did you come in
the 19th of April
Oi, temlera 19 April e momrara may 24 tiang alak alwideng la next week. Oi, temomrara next week. Meng malme soala dal gora nguti trim ogertia sei kame guk mo ay sei gel gora aurol mulngot mok al oblay e mebot gora mdira sing tial sigras ng malwara gora ulatel melel malubeng ngara direk gora ulak tungulel girela atora environment gira blue bela And so we're very happy and thrilled to have you guys here to just share some of the information about your work and but before we move on to that, I will just give you a bit of time to just share a bit of your background, and then when you're done, same thing to Sienna, and then we'll proceed with the work you're doing.
That sounds great. So yeah, I grew up in Hawaii, and I was there until I was 12. And during that time, I really enjoyed being in the ocean, and I really found like the coral reefs that were absolutely stunning, and saw a lot of how people like my family fish and use the ocean for various things. So I think taking that into my undergraduate, I decided to study marine biology, and I just was really thrilled and captivated by how the ocean works as like a system, and how these ecosystems are so important for people's health and well-being, and that's kind of just led me to studying seagrass currently.
So, ngwase ngumle ngal miskumangam logo mlogoro hawal mo 12 bargil esegidral lagegre ngal hawai en ngora mal mlobra darul gire la tora da leng mudengek madaba close to tlel trangtingila atial lugel aklangra blulat e direk mudengek marada usperada obligere la gora omglir maramung saya gora wal Ngora blo blo tanul gilen mong lo decide mo malara subel tayo da say marine biology subel aklangar rada mong seguida agora kadebel el background ra acho yang akuk mo gera siena lo say ngora kwadi bit background.
Yeah, so I grew up in California, and I think when people think California, a lot of times they think of like surfers and like beachgoers, and that's
giant kelps.
Exactly, and that's part of California. But I grew up kind of central, so inland. So I didn't see the ocean a whole lot, and so my window into the ocean was every year we'd go crabbing as a family. And I was too little to throw the pots out, so it was very much like we catch the crab, we boil them, you get to clean out the guts and throw away the insides. And I was just so fascinated by like all the different ways there are to be alive, going through the beach and combing through little invertebrates and seeing little fish here and there and having kelp wash up, the giant kelp that you talk about. And so I just got really interested in biodiversity, the idea that like life can take so many forms, and especially in the ocean, it's just expansive. And so that's sort of what got me intrigued by the ocean and marine biology. And cut to, here I am in Palau studying seagrass.
Yeah, I see. O ingal kuksena sing ga mla California din mla kalsal ngalat kulada ba bliri ra ka ngora wal gedel mora rois ngora rois ra kulada. Hindi bekkel samme to gora mo o mga mang kasi crabbing temo gora ma ka malalabu be malagi gedel ka crab ra kulada. Esa ngal gelbong ngora mal mamasanu regal ba to ko ka rois beteng lak langal ngara siya kwa adira grilili mo kuram losoal mo o tmol aklaw ginil gilila sa igal kakrus na daw bong malwangara malubetyal daw bong malwangara or to kay igal kakrus badeng laklangar. Okay, that's a very very moving, you know. Usually like that, people usually start at a young age doing something that they really love, and it somehow ended up that they wanted to pursue that same. So it's really nice to know your interest in. Now I understand you guys came to Palau to do some seagrass work.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of what's going on? With your
definitely.
work?
So we are here in Palau to study seagrass health and resilience, specifically a couple different aspects of it. So we're looking at understanding kind of the drivers of seagrass health. So what causes them to increase in cover, what causes them to decrease in cover, and specifically how do MPAs affect seagrass health. And also the fish communities that rely on them. So Sienna will get a little bit into that, but I'm really looking at those drivers of seagrass health across different scales, both at like on a blade scale per single shoot of a seagrass, all the way to more the ecosystem level. And then Sienna can give a little bit more.
Yeah. So like as a broad overview.
Go ahead.
Yeah, translate.
Otherwise, Oy, ngal chere la talure el merbela ra to la seagrass. Ang wasi ngor omesa sel wasi tial ngal ar ngra kora aurerel malu bengora kang kesterngin mora arwa to rangi kel tial hel tial klangar regal ara al seladabe se agora la longot mokringal e direk sori lo mesa sei le tirgam super tial ara yelo dosen MP yelo dosen marine protected areas ay gale dosen blue basio. For example, atara site tira tial ngamaring iwal gorawal sori lo mesa sei el tial ngamay el conservation ngarasel gorawal el drulela ay gal ngigel malu ngigal ar makaral gorat makaluror el mangatmok tial malu takir tial el environment engegidro líder ol guyung gukmora asiena la asiena gukome sagel gora segir tirira garamasi gora tora gel resel adlo malu ngel generics makale gukpodresya asiena sing. Yes, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, so the way I look at it is Joy's really interested in like the causes of seagrass decline or what causes seagrass to be healthy. And I'm really interested in how the rest of the community is impacted by seagrass health or lack thereof. And so one of the main reasons that we care about seagrass or are concerned about whether it's healthy or not is because of all the other species that it supports. So I'm really interested in, okay, how does the performance of seagrass impact the fish community? and using some fun and different tools to sort of assess whether the fish community is influenced by seagrass decline or a lack of seagrass health, and what role the MPA might play in the broader community outside of just the seagrass.
Broader marine community.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like fish community.
Yeah,
maybe.
fish community. Yeah. Okay. Oy, atcha aseng ngukorol tatmakal mel terung ay galureri ra korawal agaw kwak. Ngakuk musu bersel wasay ay gal tokol kakro sil sigras ngara selwal kora relationship ringi lo benggela. Arwangi gil betiar klol era lorori sigi the broader community madire gele ngwaseng ngal ngigileng ngarang influence ngal sigras ngarang korawal algo sil moray gal klangar rangigil mal uben dire galo sei mal sugu mendia ka ngal ar mo ara klangar rangigil sigi da kora lo subringil tara to ngado sei akora di mo ko do bingil wa de baselom so del ngal wasay malsu mangarya angi gel ngwarak asum ndia ka ar ngwarak langar angi gel ya sum to ka ar endire gel ngwarak langar ngal gel ngor o mes sey gidil teletile. Wow, that's very interesting. And so the goal of your the goal or objective of your seagrass study in Palau is basic. It sounds like more like on the how the seagrass influenced the ecology or the the community around it.
Exactly.
Also, if there was no seagrass, how's that the MPA or that ecology is functioning?
Yeah.
So in that context, right?
Yes.
Why did you choose MPA?
Yeah.
If anyone
Yeah,
wondered.
no, I'll swing at that one. So the reason we chose MPAs is because in our early talks with PICRC and researchers here, part of their surveys included both seagrass areas inside and outside of MPAs. And we all expect marine protected areas to do what they're called, which is protect, right? And so when you see that there are declines that happen inside the MPA, you start to wonder, are our interventions, are our attempts at protecting and conserving actually working? And so part of the reason we wanted to study within MPAs was to sort of start to answer that question. Are these attempts actually working? And if so, in what ways? Can they be improved? Things like that.
Ngway siya kwadir gertia say ngaram ko mal makla sigara sabul bela sera o be mobror e ko kuk mal de aurora gel sela blue basio engagi da senal mo ay say you mentioned earlier, meaning this is not your first time in Palau.
Yes.
No.
Can you give us a little bit background on that so it's kind of linked to this second phase of your work? Just a real quick, yeah.
So, so this is my fourth time in Palau, and this is Joy's third time in Palau. The first time I came was 2022 in November, and that was for another project that was using some genetic tools offshore to look at the PNMS, which I won't get into the details of, but that sort of taught me the methods that I'm using for the seagrass project. And the first time Joy and I came together to study seagrass was 2023, around March, April sort of time.
So we can say this is your second time or follow up on this seagrass work.
Yeah. This is our third time here for the seagrass work.
So this is the third time you're here for the seagrass work. Oh, tira ngal senam lera 2020. The first time you came was 2022. This era almen guklengo lura lorul. Ndi al tay de to seagrass. In this era bol dakni ngal Joy. Etiamo mo de tilmel musur tay de seagrass. Engagi da sena lo ay say. Au ulmet milil ta semedoro regal MPA. Kadro gul medina say. Sel sugum gad osmera basyo mon blul en arungut mau dosa say tia amral al dollo men amral mo ngil malngi gel amral mo to le tia blul basyo endi un program no mlasem lo ro tia ida de blul basyo el simre dingora wal oral mo kita condition regal watora arma gran seguida un tumne disa da se game do mesra egal blul basyo en gora wal el simre men dia agora wal beta do subringileng alalak albasol el sibr من ديال هذا المنسانري من ديال سيد المن غرا مسوبه هذا كل غرا مسكليم بول غرا مسوبه او انت من ديسايد المسوبه جايد الام بي اي very interesting. And so the third time, this is the third time you're coming back just for this seagrass
Yeah.
And what are some of the key questions that you're hoping to answer?
Yeah. Do you want to start
Sure.
with yours?
Yeah. So my key questions I want to answer is, first of all, like, what is driving the loss of seagrasses in
Okay.
Wall specifically, and also comparing that to other areas to try and understand that dynamic. And also, I'm interested in like specific areas on the seagrass plates that look like there's kind of dead tissue, and if there is some kind of pathogenic agent or some small microbe that is causing those lesions to occur, and is that related to the overall health and resilience of the seagrass meadows?
Okay.
So two questions in there.
Okay. Mal interesting talo subring achoy. Waseng nga musubay gagi del bulbasyo. El mal de mes se lo así. Al sum rakta ula ko dele legal en rakta. E direi lo mes el reservoir overall. You said you were looking at the diseases that affect the seagrass health, and what's the other one?
And then also the drivers of seagrass decline.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
And then more generally.
Oh, I see. Ngome sa sayid lo say. Ngaria rakta lo mwada gal seagrass. Malubeng ngarai gel ku baby raul etial seagrass amara agora wadi loral mongwem. Agi da agora walo mes direct lo mes gel. When you said you're also looking at other site, meaning non-MPA site, and
Yeah.
kind of do the comparison.
So we're comparing the difference between the MPA sites and the reference sites. So PICRC has, for a long time, done a really good job of monitoring the seagrass meadows, both inside and outside of the MPAs. So we're continuing that work and looking at the differences between inside and outside.
Okay, I think, sorry to mention it, but I think I'm beginning to get the picture. When you came, PICRC has been doing a seagrass monitoring.
Yes.
I mean, pretty basic stuff. How much percentage and stuff like that. And now you're kind of taking that into the next level. Why is seagrass is dying?
Yes.
And why and what's
And what's happening. What's happening because of that.
So you're looking at the MPA and you're looking at the
Outside.
reference sites.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Aquaram awa siya singra tialo lurerin tirga sa be lurur belaw aul mindirgal sorry gora dirgal lurur belaw amle mindingek mas tial gora rip center amaka talo mesa igal ngwal maka tal musub sel mal betangel sub gira igal togora ar ngwadi bora tial MPA malum tial bul basyo say tia ngara klungela ba sentra ar ngara alsel aba gora lui faman maka tal muru sayid lurur Mesera al mei en wagu kulmel mourora ga hidro sisil basyo e wasei ka le seltar agora a se bokre wasei ngal blul basyo agora dimral mongem da igal ar al sil mela tirgamnel gul wal gora amom ngi soy se selura bigri gul wasei ngarai gel ula agodlel malu bungu ula talmele la igal ar mongora wal oral mongem de etialo muru lo musub aloru ngira gel da sein blul basyo madire gul wasei reference hal diktribul gora na os semel bolo dengan ada sesel du reference ngara kadam belgo ni a MPA gel blul basyo indim blol sel do survey inda sal sel di survey momre ke dora e do la sei tia wangarang blol gira del sigi sel wal reference site o si silver tackle o si sil maori e gora vamos subra MPA o si sil time e dire el monitor sel reference e gora vam camper la sei len gora so la sei mauri el time kadam da sei sel sim tial basyo Umlaria agora a un chance git mukli compared to sell open lagad mina sa igel dagal el sin basyo arada o may silngara erni muhur sarwaban tumabol meda mung sa elmal lo da ar marang gora walora la uldigra al sil ya MPA awal el simrung wala ka uldigil maun magad bro wasang morin sel reference site ngad gora matmok lagal sube gora compare igel gekara subul. Wow, very interesting. Now I'm beginning to see the picture. So basically you guys came and said, hey, we can come and do our work to try and build.
Yes,
You're
so
monitoring record all these years, try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
Why is it a close area, but still the seagrass are kind of declining?
Yeah,
And that's-
exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
now
we're
I'm beginning-
building on what PICRC has already previously
Right,
done.
right.
And adding additional components.
Yeah.
Right. Adding additional component. So now we're on that's decision stuff. Let's ask Sienna your component on this.
Yeah, so my main questions, there's three of them, and I'll try and keep it brief because I know you have to translate. So basically, I'm interested in, similarly, are the MPAs affecting the fish community. So we're talking about in what ways the MPAs influence seagrass, if at all. I'm interested in that for the seagrass fish. I'm also interested in how the fish are responding to seagrass decline. So does the health state of the seagrass affect what kind of fish we see? And the last thing I'm interested in is the nursery function of seagrass. So seagrass are known to be spaces where juvenile fish can stay, grow, and become big enough to survive on the reef, right? And so what happens to that nursery function of the seagrass as it declines? Is it lost? Do we lose certain kinds of fish that rely on seagrass for nursery function? And so that's what I'm looking at is those three things.
I see. Do you also do your work in the MPA in the reference?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ngora kmedel waurele la cho indiregal lo mes segui del blue basio, matial gukti open basio, ndi ela sena o mes ngel wasei. Seloral mongem da sigras. Engal ngigleng ndio si shei di sela lu bendiregal ngora mongem drum ga sigras. That's segida taragel del nia omes. What's the second one?
The second one.
I got so tied up when I was listening to what you're doing, so I lost track of
the second one is thinking about how seagrass decline might affect what kind of fish we see. Is the fish community changing because the seagrass is being lost?
Okay. Oi, atara lo mesinga sei, mesel loral mo dia kan seagrass. Engarnya agora tel melel morai gel ngil do ngila seng blo ngara dulu laar. Ela roa me asa marwa ngana klela do tingi mama ke gel ngil ngi gidem lo mo lo sei kidro go am tingi lo sei ai gal dulu laar ablo bli langi gil sel dirgil mke grei leng blo mori ngor omar tringi sel loral mo moklol msisi ang enya tob del mora tel be bula gargel matara lo mesin sel lo sei mesel loral mo dia sigras ai ga gidro gora mongel gel langi gel dirgil mo dia do wes mo dia belo blara sigras gora protector ngi saya tar subel and the third one is
the nursery function. So as seagrass declines, do we see less juvenile fish?
Why? Okay. Seguir el function of seagrass es un nursery. Igual bilam que el nigel. Malsumung moral modo axel el seagrass. En igual tameli seguir el urel lo assembly lam que el nigel. Direct el moral legal que el nigel modo al bigo sem la modo seagrass la wal gal el me martringi. Ayegi da algo o mesel. Wow, very interesting. Very interesting.
A lot going on.
There's many projects.
Right. You know, I know when it comes to science, it can be only one small thing, and that's a whole project, you know.
Yeah.
It's really... Anyway, now, can you share us... I'm kind of wondering. So when you try to learn all these things, disease and stuff, and effect of seagrass in the fish population, I'm beginning to wonder, how the heck are you able to find out that?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like method, eh? What do you do to try and measure that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it really depends on the question that you're answering. So we have many different methods that we're using. Primarily while we're here is that we do the field surveys. So we go out, we put down transects, and we put down our square that captures a little portion of the seagrass, and we go out and we estimate percent cover and we count every single seagrass and the species within those areas. And then
within those squares.
Within the squares, exactly. And then, so that continues the work that PICRC was doing with a little bit of additional information with counting. And then additionally, we have deployed loggers inside the seagrass meadows on cinder blocks that basically will track light and temperature for the next year. So that will be really helpful in understanding how these areas, these different sites that we're going to compare to each other, and how the MPA and the reference site also compares to each other in terms of abiotic factors. And then for the disease work, what we're doing is basically there's a few questions. So we're trying to understand and estimate the baseline kind of like presence of these lesions. So to do that, we go out and pick along the line, along the transect, like around 20 seagrass blades and many different areas. And then we get an estimate of that. And then I'm also employing some lab methods and experiments to see if the lesions are actually transmittable to a healthy seagrass blade. Yeah, it's a lot of information.
Right. Macam kalau saya selbolo rula gagi dulur. murgia ngarial do sen transect tape saya ko standard method do experience do surverwa se mokte kanya ka murgi masel mo subul mo momrek engora wal ngaria wa ungil cloud ngel kala sei kel sample malu betalum subek black mu tiawal gora orgomel awak lungel ngaral area wal gor omte awak lungel ngaral area melat setra transect inge kita chelo se tungwa gora square when you say square, are you using the plastic quadrat?
Yeah.
The quadrat. Sengkel square lolgonia quadrat. Ay gabla albeo base ra formula mana. Seguida un mok medir agora o mesala. Gel sigra sang achera sei. Ngral species e wangra condition ni matamom tin la seng wangra seguidia. And then when it comes to sample collection, you say you go along the
same transect.
the same transect, and then you pick out.
Yeah, so we haphazardly, so we kind of randomly choose thalassia blades, and then I take them back to the lab. I clean them of all the things that are growing on them, and then we scan them, so I have a permanent record of what that seagrass blade looks like. And then back at home, we can go and say, oh, this one has a lesion, this one doesn't, and we can estimate the area as well.
When you say lesion, you're referring to some sort of
so like dead tissue.
Lesion, dead tissue. Okay.
That is very dark. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, may la sergu polo la gidle sample bolomes, engagi lo say. Tokora di random, dakal salwa say. Kad morgereng ngungal sampora seagrass blade ngelle la. Tokora di random a pick. Egora may gidle mera labe egora mat. Lo tobda yel gora bregdring plon ngari agor wayum duma adingit el bregdring gal lela matang mon mobes e gore masya sing ngi mungora amomdel wal record lo ase mle agra condition ri e osilta metome sayid legion a legion agel gora sebad lo ase wal gora tut egel gora rakt gora dubel dil dubel tiaro gilela gora dubel telgib eguk ngile dubel telgib akora momlat kaygele elle laqbu rir el dasen tutk ngora di cleaner web telangari agora raktel gora yelol gora alijana wali yit matang mal momrek so what happened after you clean? Are you going to look at whatever you clean after?
So well, we don't look at what we clean. That's another project that someone else at Stanford could potentially study here. But I'm looking specifically at the blade if there's like dark tissue and specific patterning. And then in addition, I'm also doing experiments to see if you have a healthy blade and a blade that has those lesions on, and put them together, if the lesions then appear on the healthy blade. So,
wow, very interesting.
So that would say a microbe or something that is causing the lesions then transferred to the healthy blade.
Ngakaruk temeng mat egora mo omesa segang ari arak trial ibem bay diak. Tabay mal mat mo es yal suba taralela aram laring gigidel doseng tutk tungul mergedira. Aku pes lela aral diak tut keringi omesa sei ngengi mul morong kaltam seguida alo subringia. And then in your case,
yeah, when it comes to the fish, so I'm relating the fish to those seagrass surveys we do. So how do I know like what fish are there and how many there are and all of that good stuff? The first thing I do is while we do our surveys, I put out a GoPro, so these small cameras, and I just walk it out 20, 30 steps away from our surveys. And I set it there, I let it record while we do our surveys. Our surveys usually take 45 minutes, sometimes an hour. So all that time, that's just recording anything that swims by.
Right.
Then when I come home, I can watch all those videos and I can count and ID all the fish that I see.
Nice, right.
So we see some really fun stuff. We see black tips, we see rays, we also see really small things like damselfish and juvenile parrotfish and cool things like that. So that's one way we get at the question of what fish are there, but also are they adults or are they juveniles? The other thing I do is the genetic tool, which is called environmental DNA or eDNA for short. And sort of the way that works is us, for instance, right now. Every time we speak, every time we breathe, every time we touch something, we're leaving DNA everywhere. That sounds disgusting, but it's true. Fish do the same thing in the water column. When one of them eats the other, there's blood everywhere. If they shed a scale, every time water passes through their gills, they're leaving DNA around. So what I do is I collect water along those transects in the seagrass bed, and I push the water through a filter with really tiny holes, and then all the DNA, all the tissue attaches to that filter. I'm able to extract that DNA from the filter and use the DNA to say what kinds of fish are there. These are all the species that have been in that area in the last about 12 to 15 hours.
Meaning, there's there's a big database on DNA on different species of fish.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
why. Okay.
Exactly. So when I get that DNA, I can cross-reference it with the database
Right.
of fish.
Because
from
as
around
you
the
were
world.
talking, I was wondering, how did you know this is the DNA of the small blackfish?
Yeah.
So there's okay. Okay, elangal talurere la siena dire kan interesting. Selbong ngaku komisar wangil melang mon nga yel dosen GoPro. By the way, I forgot to mention, every time you guys go out, you always put the temperature log. This site have a permanent, well,
Yes.
not semi-permanent temperature logger.
Yes.
You leave them there throughout the whole
Yes.
project duration. Temla salgo telmet temla gagi del basio, motolai gel dosen temperature logger. Tia amulugura klel dele lavao. Luaseng malwangara lensorin mo mga say tial blue basyo adia kala blue basyo ngara klel dele lava bringi rabek kelsilse melatem la display gagi mga ngi mostar tumro gagi lureri mesegi de selurere la actual black adire dir bomrek mela kuk mo mga gora ba olida gel logo senal gira ureri selurere la siena say selbong gagu korora torangi melang mol setra ora tuasen GoPro ti agora underwater camera magdungun era daw etira survey makram ngil camera di muluy mangidil ngaral ngil ngalak ma reger rogul ngil ngalak se camera lang asya singiri mela sa lang asya singiri ang mombrek edire kalma water sample atagi del daw ngagi del momol ko lasay ay gal DNA asbel mga tial daw lengi kala albebira time selungi kaya agil gora angap tila adire el grup temot tialdaw balubet takawat takabang tumakarang agil war si mga rasa el mot tialdaw melang galek tagi del daw malmay e gore mi mal di mosel daw mo de ka gora dingit maralo bungel e gore mal meralap masel langal meralap e ngarnya klol trigal hakasira blul adam lamot mountain madi en era I would say pretty much most of the reef fish around the world has been a DNA gold. Right? Pretty much, I guess.
A lot of them, but you'd
Yeah.
honestly be surprised how many haven't, especially in tropical regions.
Oh.
Because there's so many different species
Right,
in
right,
like
right.
these lower latitudes.
Oh,
It's really
okay,
hard to
okay,
get a reference
okay.
sequence for everything. But we
Oh, I
do
see.
have a lot. We have
Right.
enough that I can identify about 60 or so different fish species from water samples.
In the
Oh,
seagrass.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
in the seagrass, yeah.
Anyway, ngari segi the klol gora tay tabay silblal ha ka blul adam lamay gal di enel smural sil melasel nga water sample ang kal sienal mong LB en sa elmong o mesagel DNA e gora walo la bal matcha senga ngar sela malubeng gora ngaptel ang aral ngigil. Oh wow, very interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And so you're doing that in the lab. And for the your data, of course, we don't have a pretty sort of like maybe a university laboratory stand, high tech lab. So of course, all the sample you're going to bring with you or send them back home for further.
Yeah, so for mine, for the filters that I extract DNA from, I take them back home and then I process them in the lab. So it looks like extracting the DNA and making copies of it so I can sequence it. And then computationally, I'm able to cross-reference that database so I can tell what sequence comes from what fish. So that all happens back home.
Hopefully, in the near future, you would be able to sequence that in Palau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a very
Amazing.
good DNA lab, and staff are trained to run the lab. But for the sequencing, I think we're still working on that, if I'm not mistaken. We're still trying to find a way to. The whole idea is so we can do the sequencing in Palau instead of like every time
Shipping it off. It's expensive to...
It's expensive,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Especially from Palau, yeah.
Oy, mangga kita, sianan mo nga semsel bol mo kay gayid lurel ko rami ay gayid ral met may gayid sampon mo ra aday nga kartire u mutro ora omesa. To aset sequence mo omese ora la omi el mutro mal mo kam ritro sing ngara te tel sequencing. Wow, very interesting the work
I also am doing some sequencing as well. So we go and we sample as well as the other things, specific blades that have those lesions, and then I'm cutting them up, and we will extract DNA from them and see what is inside those lesions as well. So to try to identify what is causing them. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hindi na kalilo sising anggal el chia direk ay gigid dula sengora tut kelela angal me gore ado ay gigid tut ko e direk el momt otoba da gel DNA ringi e direk el gor omes rasei ngara ay gigid tut ka ay gigid tut ko tugul me omes ay gal DNA ngara al sertial ras lu uleng mo godir ngal sigaras mong mal interesting awre tegal teru legabil ta tamsuba gegi de omes ay gel wars el mata trial mong mosbil wara malas mlongen ay gel gel wasi ngara ula god le legal sigaras mong wadi mral mo dia malubeng mo dia ay gal sigaras ngari al wara mo otomili raklangar trigal magaga ngalgelangi lo spell wara wal lo marta tira gagi del drula ar mom klol mom sisi abnire muto del marge mal interesting ay gal. What are some of the challenges, real quick? I know we're running out of time, so just real quick. What are some of the challenges so far, the time you've been coming back to work?
Yeah. So the second time we went out and we deployed temperature loggers all on every site. And unfortunately, the stake I put them on, there's a little circular metal piece, and I put the hobo logger onto the metal piece, and the metal pieces have all rusted out. So I don't get any of the data from the last year. So that has been a challenge.
That's a bummer, yeah.
Another challenge we had is something that happened yesterday that you and here are all aware of is the tides are difficult to work with. So it's easiest to get to our sites when the tide is high and the boat can reach them, but they're intertidal seagrasses. So once the tide's out, the boat...
Right, that's right.
Yeah. So yesterday our boat got stuck on a seagrass bed, and we had to wait it out for 3-4 hours. We got back around 7,
right.
full moon out.
Waiting for the high tide so the boat can...
So the boat could move. We had to push our boat out of the seagrass bed, which was an
After
experience.
waiting 3 hours.
Yes, it's a challenge, but I believe we can kind of find a way to work around that.
Oh,
For example, the metal rod. Maybe next time you try to bring aluminum or stainless.
A cinder block.
Yeah.
And then for the boat,
the first time we got stuck too. So
right, and for the boat, if you know that the tide is going very low, before it gets really low,
we got to move it.
Move the boat to a deeper area. So by the time you're done, you just walk to the boat and then head back. Anyway,
Normally, that's what happens.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
That's just a little tip I can offer you guys. Anyway, so we're coming to the conclusion of our show. Would you like to say anything before we close our radio show?
I'd like to say I don't know how many people listen to this, but just since I've come here 4 years and always been with PICRC, for those of you who do know, we lost someone very important to us recently, Arius. Anyone out there who knows him, cares about him, just wanted to say, if it helps, he's touched so many people around the world. There's a community of people in California who really feel this loss. So we're with you, and rest in peace to Arias.
Yeah, I agreed.
Oh, so okay. Tira ngora dira kal salmal mo klotoy makoram elalo to the tendi to koram laduli ngaria korap kay semrong gariol dilu ulmeramam ya ul tamal korang atyang eselulubong diri asolil kora di imo to dringil girelangal tara adra ramal namo dibus ra adlongolet abigos tamatingeleng ngai gidil adra ram tira selmei en esel do sa to speangrang etamo molgon ngai gidil adra ram ngia gutmokla teman kita rin tora obase kling tereng ora di solir ngatang ase komil ora bebi ngal adem no dibus marsalil tibo matingela sa mal loba ngobra dan dil giretial kais amrung gariol sia ko adim solir mulgonin mo ulubong la dil giretial shorgid gida marmara ulubong ra shorgid maklamo diregal mo osmritial show maklumuk telmal mena gasulio arogul adem no sibil tulin ore setiap program rigid mboto ga gidil mal interesting lurol girela togora wa sigras atogora amran atogora ngigil mong ngungilar ngutsel do dengek pasay tangari adra ngara krel belau gongel kora me oral trial Hindi ka belo rol ko maktuba ba siluror. Ay ga ora dik mutmok malungi la ngudra adra center gid mar adra auror mla kutmok lega. Tirikawal mail mom leel. Wabolo leel ay gal ngari luror. Ilmu tiltral gora mo ko makail mal el mo kadam mal mo se edem tigra. Lo asay gam palwang rat telel tel gerger malwang rat telela. Aluror may gal klara sila daw be. Makadam ya sulin mo sibil el gongel me mo aurora ay to ko wasigras. Masilbol merek tial lureri la to asigras. En la uk sibil ko na mo subil lo gu ay gel ke kara subil asay ay gal sigras sa ul mo moral mo dia qabla uli gagid may gagid rakta la ko mal you know. Kada qadi qar selom subel men dia qad sal mal musad al masing mo agra result. Kada qadi ay say intilang tingil aurol mo sugid mo kadmo o madngel wasay magrada manage malu magra dong qari dong tmok legal logo ay gigid el clothing el wasay ay gigid atal melel mo kadmo tral ko ra masad gigid atal melel mo kadmo ko tel gargid adal wa chemal di meritiang akmal mre asulin muslim tunin orang sengi tial Berius Ice e mga madaro kami alguk mereng sa sel next Berius Ice gid rasel melbel sel ko mal sular rugoy e me ikam
Talingin Oh you Narauro hotel balula Limbalti Karin El malat karang aramaka Arangalage Balwa Magabe